culture has to be an alignment exercise from top to bottom. What I mean by that is you need to start with, what is your company trying to do? What is your value proposition to the market? Are you the lowest cost provider? Are you the best quality provider? Are you starting a new market that doesn't exist today? The reason that's important from my end is because you need a support system in the culture and organization that enables you to execute on that promise. If you're saying you're the lowest cost provider to your customer, you need to build a company culture that operates with that mindset day in and day out. You can't be a company that decides that I'm going to take a 2-hour flight and go business class, right? It means by default, you're expecting we're going to go economy class to that flight, because if we don't do that, we cannot meet the promise of the organization. So for me, I like to link it in that way as well, because if your culture does not mirror how you come out to the customer in your value proposition, then over time, especially as you grow, you're going to veer off of that promise. And this is where a lot of companies start failing. Welcome back to a new episode of Organized Chaos. I'm your host, Nahat Kairala, and today I am thrilled to have Vijay Rajendran joining me on the show. Vijay is an executive coach and advisor to founders at Startup System, where he's made it his mission to help entrepreneurs overcome the 3 biggest challenges that can make or break a startup: fundraising, sales, and people. With experience supporting hundreds of founders across major venture portfolios, Vijay has seen firsthand what separates the companies that scale successfully from those that just plateau or fail. He is also the author of The Funding Framework, a comprehensive guide that's helping founders navigate the complex world of raising capital. But what I really appreciate about Vijay's approach is that he doesn't just focus on getting the money. He helps leaders build the systems, culture, and team dynamics that actually turn that funding into sustainable growth. Today, we're diving deep into how fast-growing companies can tackle those critical areas of fundraising, sales, and people management while maintaining the kind of culture that attracts top talent and drives results. Now let's jump right into my conversation with Vijay. First off, Vijay, super happy to have you on the show. And, I was excited to have you on the show when we first spoke, and having followed you on social media for the past couple of months since we last spoke, I'm even more excited because, you've managed large venture portfolios, you coach startup founders and advise them, you've written a book about the topic. I'd love it if you could introduce yourself to the audience and just give us an overview as to, how you got here and what got you so passionate about working with startups to where you are today.
Oh, thank you so much, Ned. This is a real treat, and I'm a big fan and really looking forward to our conversation today. My general career path has been around being of service to entrepreneurial leaders in one way or another. And I've been one myself as a founder in e-commerce and fintech. But the journey has really been about enabling people who are underdogs and tribers and perhaps with a few resources to do things that don't seem easily possible. And that's the definition of entrepreneurship. And so whether you're building a big startup in Silicon Valley, or somewhere in the world you have an idea of like, I need to do this for myself, my community, my family, the world, those are important dreams that need to be nurtured, and those are the kind of folks that I love to work with and support.
No, that's great. And again, we've spoken a lot about, your book before and some of the work you're doing. Tell us a bit more about that. You've written a great book, The Funding Framework. It rose to the top of new releases on Amazon in entrepreneurship, right, and venture. So I would love if you could talk to us a bit more about that. And I'll definitely include a link in the show notes for all the listeners who are interested.
Thank you. So I appreciate that. I came to the funding framework wanting to put down and put together, and the book is, as you said, available wherever great books are sold online. The key learnings were, from my own experience as an entrepreneur, as a founder of a startup, is I didn't understand really what I was supposed to be doing with fundraising. You think it is about sharing what you built and your journey, and this is what matters, and you just have to find people and then just connect, and you go to a bunch of opportunities to bump into potential investors. And then there's they're looking for this thing, this person's looking for that thing. And I didn't have a structure really to do that. Fast forward some number of years, and I was leading a portfolio, as you mentioned, for a major venture capital firm, and we had a lot of pre-seed and seed stage companies. And I saw these founders just where I was, like some 10 years before. And what that really illustrated to me was, people need to have a great process. They need to have like structure. They need to have an idea that they have a good story to tell, and that they have a specific plan of outreach. And so the book really covers this in 4 phases. And so the 4 parts of the framework are storytelling, organization, outreach, and closing with confidence. And the reason this is so important is because, too often you expect that the first thing you ask somebody as you are starting to raise money for your company is, who should I talk to? And who is often the wrong question. And first, I think why and what are really much more important in terms of your story and why it matters. And then later it will become clear for whom that is a fit. And so really working on nailing the story, and not just the pitch, but your reason for being, and the kind of conversations you want to have with potential investors, customers, and so on. Having really great organization where like preparation really beats prayer in terms of like having not just your deck, but also your data room and other things together. And then in the third phase, thinking about outreach and really approaching this much more like an enterprise sale, where there are angels and venture firms for whom your business is exactly on thesis. And for them, they will really want to, talking to you because, you're what they've been looking for and what they've been waiting for this whole time. And so I think taking that approach, as opposed to the spray and pray, shots on goal, let's have like 200 meetings and see if like one of them says yes, kind of approach is really, really hard. And why I think it's important to kind of find this path. And the last part I mentioned, part 4, closing with confidence, that's really important because a lot of people kind of get to a term sheet, they get to diligence, think they answered all their questions, and then something goes wrong, the term sheet is pulled, things go wrong at the last minute, that they get to the finish line and they can't cross. And that is really heartbreaking. And so a big part of that chapter is about how you need to aggressively project manage the close for your startup, because it is your responsibility and not necessarily that of your investors or lawyers. Like you as the founder and CEO of the company have to take that on directly.
No, that's great. And I mean, look, I've been around so many startups as well, and I agree with everything you're saying. Like most startup founders, especially if they've never done this before, it seems like they're running around like headless chicken because they don't know exactly what to do, and there isn't no framework that they can work with. And to your point, I mean, the spray and pray approach with investors, not only is it a lot of work and effort, it is so demoralizing when you're trying to go and, just pitch your startup and then you don't know how to do it and what to look for and how to position it and how to storytell and that kind of thing. I've seen a lot of founders who just get completely demotivated, and they're like, you know what? I'm not going to even go and seek fundraising. Although to your point, they might be positioning themselves incorrectly. They might be talking, the way they're approaching it might be incorrect and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's really great.
Absolutely.
That's really great.
I have a lot of stories in the book that really bring to life what people are doing wrong. And there are some stories that were absolute disasters I didn't want to share because it would become clear like who it was.
It is.
All right. But
a lot of us too.
there are a bunch of like things in the book where I changed the names to protect the guilty. But it's very important to say like these are real like scenarios where people have either gotten something really right or gotten something really wrong in terms of what they showed up to do. Like sometimes, there were founders who go into a meeting. I don't have a plan. I'm just going to show them the product. I'm going to demo. This is what I do. I build this thing. I'm a product guy. I'm going to like demo or
wow them.
Yeah, exactly. Or I'm going to get them on the platform. They're going to start trying this out, and then that's going to and they keep telling me how much they like what I'm doing, right? But then like no next steps come. So there are like a bunch of things that I think are important to get right. I've even seen like experienced people like say, and just last week I was talking to a founder who was saying, well, we're going to get into the meeting and we're just looking for advice, this and that. And like, yes, that's true. That's right. Don't come across as like desperate, like we are running out of cash in like 2 months kind of a situation, but still be structured and organized and tell the story in this way. And then like answer people's questions, create a conversation, as opposed to, yeah, I'm here. I'm building this product. It's this cool thing. We're doing that. It's something in AI. You invest in AI. So what can you advise us on? It's like, well, create value in that meeting for all sides and own that meeting. I think that is the most important thing for founders to do, is to like show up as someone who, ought to be in that room.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. So, Vijay, you've spoken about three big challenges that face startups, right? We talked a bit about the fundraising part. There's also the sales and people part, and this show is focused on the people side for most things. I'd love it if you could talk a bit more and walk us through the sales and people side specifically, and what are these biggest challenges that you see facing startups, given you've worked with so many of them over the years?
Yeah. So in addition to fundraising, there's also GTM, particularly founder-led sales in a B2B context. And then thirdly, how do you scale teams? The thing about the founder-led sales is I think we have a very sometimes simple understanding of what you should do, which is, pick a big market, right? And or pick a market that you know. And there is usually other components to like what it comes down to in terms of selecting a good market. And that also means like people's openness to working with outside solutions, their awareness that other things are happening. And of course, also their belief in your authority to sell or to solve their problem. And the combination of all those things like actually sets you up for a lot of like early traction or not. And where you see pull from the market, where this is just kind of happening, then it's really exciting because like you show up and the customer's like, yeah, I get what you do. Oh, this makes sense. Like this is what we've been waiting for, and we've been looking for something like this, or right? Like that's where the initial parts of product market fit start to take shape. And so that is like the first part. There's other aspects, like I talk about how you really create a value proposition that's built not on what you like, but actually what the customer really values. So, they're looking for something faster and cheaper. Great. Like talk about your product in terms of faster and cheaper, not in terms of why you built it in this way, right? Like we all want to get like super philosophical sometimes in terms of the value proposition, but having a rubric for breaking that down is into things that are matter for customers and are in their language matters more than anything. We as founders believe in. And then thirdly, this part about building teams. This has a lot to do with how do you create great functional organizational design, and also bring people's genius into the picture and design ways to work where you have frustration, but there can be complementary people on your team that make you better. And so that is, and I think like key, and particularly where you find in a startup context, people have like 4 or 5 jobs, right? Like people are doing more than one thing. So how do you still like think about like good functional design? How do you graduate from being the chief everything officer, the chief enablement officer, where your goal is to like set other people up for success, to eventually being chief executive officer, which doesn't come until you have executives that you're leading and they lead and they have ownership over certain things where they're managing managers and managers, right? Like that day will come, but it's hard to sort of make the flip from chief everything officer to executive officer, and that key part of enablement matters because that is another like skill that is developed for how you set people up, have certain operating system or whatever for them to do their best work.
There's 2 things you mentioned there that got my heart rate up because I talk about these things a lot, specifically the chief everything officer, which I love that you said. And the second one is the org structure, which I think is not talked about enough in the startup world, right? So let's start with the org structure first, because I want to sort of double down a bit and get your take. And I want to sort of give you a bit of an idea of what I see. And I would love your take as well from your perspective. Is a lot of times I see org structure personally when I'm working with growing companies, especially those that are scaling, right? And they're at a stage where org structure, is no longer just the founder and everyone else reporting to them. They're starting to have layers. Is they go the very traditional route where they look at what other companies are doing, or they bring in people who sort of dictate what they're used to.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they end up with an org structure which, as opposed to enabling their business, it actually holds them back. What I typically tell founders mostly is that your org structure has to be an enabler of your strategy. It has to be taken out from that strategy. It has to fit in with it very well. Like if you're a product-led company, product has to be elevated. If you're a company that focuses on efficiency, supply chain management, so forth, then your operations team probably has to have an elevated function. So what are your thoughts on that? And what are some of the things you see on an org?
I think it's not their fault, but a lot of people look at what does a company look like? Okay. And then they try and create this blueprint or borrow a blueprint really from something that looks more like General Motors than a startup. So it's like, oh, okay, I'm the CEO. I need to have this. Okay. I'm not sure what you do. You're my COO. Okay. And you're the one person who's, able to code this thing. Okay. So you're the CTO, right? So he's like, throw out these titles because that's what we see. But in fact, here's where things go wrong. Like 1 to 2 years out, you find, you know what, our CTO may be like the most talented developer we've ever looked at, but they don't actually have experience architecting a product. Or that person who's the COO, they were awesome generalist I knew at the beginning, but I don't actually know what they're going to grow into. Or and then you find we had a bunch of generalists at the start because we were like a tiny team, like doing things, but now we need specialization. Am I hiring specialization in areas that I'm weak, or that things that actually like drive the business because we need a different sort of customer success formula, or maybe what would attack the pain points of the business are, product marketing and other things we don't have. So you as a founder need to own the main thing and keep the main thing. And you are looking for extreme leverage in whatever is the focal point of the business. If it is, product or engineering oriented, or maybe sales oriented or whatever. So yeah, I think at the beginning, focusing on those things, and then maybe finding, some out of the box solutions in terms of, okay, what is a fractional solution for what we need, or how do we use agents in ways that don't add headcount for things that either matter for our customers or matter internally for us, which is what more companies are now exploring at all sizes and stages.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't think org structure, to your point, is one of those copy-paste situations. And and to your point, it also, like, a lot of organizations approach it that way. And something which I completely agree with you on, is you got to think outside the box, and you got to do what works for your business and what enables you to deliver to your customers and add that value. Otherwise, I mean, you're not doing anything, for your favor, in your favor. But the second point you mentioned earlier was the chief everything officer, right? And it's one of those things that I've spoken about so many times on this podcast and other podcasts, and even in content, is founders understanding when it's time to start graduating from that role is a little challenging, right? It's not very clear cut. And I've always seen founders that I've worked with really express that with very good intent. Like, we're not sure when is the right time to really hand over some of these things that we do today and become, the chief enablement officer and potentially graduate to CEO at some point. What kind of advice do you have for founders to help them really make those decisions and determine when is really the right time for me to start delegating, for me to start, changing what my job role looks like?
There's no one moment. I think there's a bunch of moments where they realize they have to change the job role. So most people will say, well, when we get to a certain size, then we can add more headcount, right? And that is like the very, I think, like linear way of thinking about it. Alternatively, if you imagine we are enabling people on our team and then asking, where are they stuck? What's the bottleneck, right? Okay, I need to give them more authority in those areas and explain, this is my definition of done, or this is like what our intent is. And then how do you like move forward there and make like your own decisions, just like do these things. So you give people more responsibilities in areas where there are bottlenecks. So you're not the bottleneck, but you do a good job over communicating what your intent is and what they should do. So I think that is the first step, because usually you're carrying around all the ideas and all the thoughts, and everyone's coming to you, and that feels fine for a while until suddenly things aren't going on. So usually companies have like a bunch of internal metrics. It could be the rate at which you're shipping product. It could be your sales cycle, right? There's usually one big rhythm that is essential for the company. And so defining your big rhythm that's tied to the metric that really matters, that's going to explain to everyone in the company, hey, we have a North Star, and also to investors. It allows you to like think back and say, where are my bottlenecks? Okay, great. Let me break those bottlenecks open and now continue looking for more bottlenecks. And that is, I think, a way in terms of unblocking and helping the business get to a different place. There's another phase, which is around product market fit, or maybe earlier. You start to wonder, okay, wow, I think the business is growing. We need to hire salespeople, or I think we need a marketing team, and we need to like do like a whole like brand exercise, right? And oftentimes these are fields where the founder isn't sort of classically trained or has the direct experience, but they think, oh, I need someone to come in who knows this really well. And I would encourage people to sort of trust their own intuition here and realize we need to get to product market fit in order to then write the sales playbook that other people can come in and own, or rather copy, because like that's what good salespeople want to do. They want to know that there is that cycle and that playbook of this is like how we do things in order to close. And it might be that later you have someone who's a very experienced sales leader come in and own the sales process, but they're probably going to reinvent everything because they want to do what worked for them at their previous company, and that can set you back 3, 4, 5 months as the whole team goes through that adjustment. So keeping momentum is really important, and that's why yes, having that playbook makes sense. Or saying, I'm going to say, these are the things our customers are saying they value, and so that is like what we're going to like stick to and talk about when it comes to product marketing or even social media or stuff like that, right? So you get to again identify what matters, pick the intent and the style of going with it, and then asking, okay, maybe we need a fractional person in here. We don't need to bring in someone who's got like way more experience and is overqualified. And so the great sweet spot is a person who is like maybe work like 2 stages out from where you are now, because they're not bringing in like big company experiences and playbooks to try and implement in your little company, but they do know what the next 2 levels or stages look like, so that you're able to make that evolution with the benefit of all that they know.
No, I love everything you said, Vijay. I mean, no wonder we hit it when we first spoke, right? Because I mean, there's a lot of synergy there. But I mean, in terms of the founder, I think founders don't have it easy, right? Like it's really not very clear cut in terms of when you make decisions and so forth. But there are a lot of signs, like you mentioned, right? Something I usually like to tell founders, especially when it comes to, okay, what should I do versus what others should be doing, is I love what you said around the bottlenecks, because that is typically the first painful sign you start seeing, like things aren't getting, maybe the quality's taking a hit, maybe our release timeline is being extended, we're having more bugs in the system, our velocity is going down, a lot of these things.
Yeah.
But also something I usually tell founders, which I've seen work a lot with folks, is that I ask them to be honest and really write down what are the things that they are good at doing, of course, with some guidance, but also what are the things they want to keep doing and why? And how does it actually advance the business? Because The reason I like that is for a few. One is there's a difference between you being good at something and wanting to keep doing it, because
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of people are good at a lot of things, right? But if you don't want to keep doing it all the time, especially as a founder and your role starts growing,
Oh yeah.
those are the things that I've seen them classically start, sweeping under the rug and not wanting to do, and just, not even delegating them, but just throwing them to the side. And all of a sudden they just grow where they turn into big problems. The other thing is that, well, okay, how does this move the business forward? Because also, it's not about what you like doing only. Does that actually help? And are you the right person to be doing that? A lot of times, when I've had these conversations, a lot of them were tough conversations. I've even sometimes gone as far to get to a conclusion with some founders where they don't even want the job as the CEO. Like, you
Yeah.
know what? I want to grow to a point where I want to sort of, let's say, lead product, or I want to be the person
Yeah.
working on X or Y, right?
Mhm.
And what I've seen valuable is that clarity actually helps them grow their organization, because then they have a goal which they're aspiring to, not only for the company, but the role they play in it.
Mhm.
And the lack of that clarity sometimes leads to a lot of bottlenecking. If the CEO, I've worked with CEOs before who needed to sign off on a light bulb being changed in an office. So CEOs who actually don't get involved in anything, and it looks like it's a crazy company where
Yeah.
you don't know what's going on. So the balance is great there. But I also love that you mentioned. I love that you brought up the product market fit stage,
Mhm.
because it's the one I see typically which is the trickiest for a
Oh
growing
yeah.
company, because
Mhm.
that intent to scale prematurely and start bringing on salespeople and marketing people and so forth, a lot of times, to your point, doesn't work out because you're not ready for that yet. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're product market fit stage, you're still trying to get
Yeah.
that product market fit and finding your
Absolutely.
niche, finding the positioning.
If you think you're close, you're not close. Like and everybody, everybody who has experience that says, "Oh yes, you realize once you have it, but you don't ever know how close you are." It's like being a ship at night at sea, and you see a lighthouse, and you have a vague sense that it's there, but until you land to shore, you cannot exactly pinpoint how far or close you are. I've had conversations with founders like, we are so close to product market fit. We are not knocking on the door. It's like, you can't be close. Like you have to just like it's like SpaceX trying to like land a rocket, right?
Yeah.
It either landed or it blew up, right?
Yep.
Like that it's like that difficult. So I think you can have momentum, you can have growth, you can be hitting your goals, and you might have one part of product market fit, but not the other. So one measure might be, many of your listeners will have heard this, like 40% of your users say that they would be very disappointed if the product went away, right? So yes, that's one way of like looking at product market fit. But if you have 40% of users saying that they would sort of miss your product, but then you have like some retention issues,
I turn.
in every new cohort that you try, right? Because you're still like very small, but like every new cohort has retention. It's like, okay, then we're not crossing the chasm yet. We're not like
Yeah.
getting to that early majority. So when you know that you are when you are growing in ways where things are breaking because you can't handle the demand, where you feel this pull from the market, where like you both the people who have you love you and recommend you, and you have an high NPS score, but also like in the new markets that you go into, you're seeing like better and better churn. You're seeing network effects or all these like other things. It's this combination of stuff that tells you that you are succeeding. Just like, mastering one subject doesn't make you a great student. It turns out you'll have to work in a bunch of them in order to be successful at school.
No, I love that. Now, the biggest kicker for me, Vijay, is when people sometimes listen to the show and they're like, why is the HR person talking about this stuff? And I'd love your take on this. My argument is that if you don't understand these business fundamentals,
Yeah.
especially for growing companies and all that kind of stuff, if a founder, let's say I'm the fractional HR leader or
Yeah.
HR leader for an organization, and the CEO or founder comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to hire 10 salespeople." We're there. if I don't understand how this works, I don't understand each stage in the organization, so forth, I can't do my role in advising the business to do what's best for the business. All I will do is I'll be a yes man and say, well, of course, let me put my recruiter hat on. Let me get you 10 salespeople yesterday.
Yeah.
Is that something you see? And where do you see the people functions role in helping companies grow sustainably?
Yeah. There's all kinds of things that you'll see in literature, from having the right people on the bus or the right people on the right seats, right? When you don't have the right people, things are not, running smoothly. There's a very poor rhythm to the company. And then you have companies that have developed a certain like rhythm where people have autonomy, mastery, and purpose, to borrow from Dan Pink, and they are showing up with the right rewards, recognition, and like respect for what they do. Like this is where, from a culture perspective, you win, and it's where, from an organizational perspective, you win, because you're both effective and like people want to be there, and you attract great people to what you're doing. There are like 3 levers classically that you can pull in your startup founder, right? Like I can focus on people, I can do something about product, or I can do something about process. And, the conventional wisdom would be that people ops and HR really is just about people. Like, oh, we just have to like find and put the right people there, and then we drop them in. But, how do you enable them and set them up for success on day one? How are they going to work together? And then do you have processes that are getting the most out of that expensive investment in people? Or are they, working in ways that are at times counterproductive? So very, very important to think about the intersection of all these things when, you're stepping into that people role. So you're not bringing people on only to see the attrition you don't want to see, or the goals that you expect to not be met.
No, that's great. You mentioned culture, Vijay, and I'm not going to let that one slide. I'm going to dive into it.
Yeah.
Because culture is, especially at fast growing companies, and I'm sure you've seen this as much as I have, is culture is one of those things that could fly off the rails quickly when you're growing very fast, or if done intentionally, it could be really that superpower that propels a company to the next stage. What are some of the things you see companies doing right and wrong in the culture space? And what are some advice you have for founders when it comes to building a healthy and strong culture for their organization?
Yeah. So leaders have to live and lead in line with their values, and they need to think about who is part of our team and how do we work that is consistent with those values. So the alternative to that is, we just need someone here. We need to move very fast. I don't really care about this. And, we're too small for an employee handbook or that stuff, right? I'm not talking about employee handbook. I'm talking about like, this is the purpose. This is our manifesto. This is why we started the company. This is, what matters to me. This is what I expect. Here's my personal user manual for you as my co-founder, fellow employee, to or whatever, to work with me successfully as, and having like that shared understanding of like who we are, why we do what we do, and then also communications architecture that follows out of that, then becomes a set of habits and norms and things that are just what you do. And then if that's what you do, that is solidified as culture.
No, I agree. I mean, what I typically tell founders and HR leaders in startups is, your culture, if you don't intentionally design it, it will take a life of its own and form and mold into whatever it forms into. It will become whatever Frankenstein it is. Hey, you could hit the lottery and it works out, but that's seldom the case, right? In case you are not doing it intentionally, and to your point, based on specific values, ways of doing things, how do we want to operate as an entity? How do we actually make decisions, right? What are the behaviors that we want to celebrate versus the ones that won't fly here? If you're not super intentional about those, then it'll be based off of the people that come into the organization. And something that I caution usually founders on is that if you don't intentionally define what the culture is, not only is the culture in the company not going to go the way you want it, but you're not even going to bring in the right people who fit and enable that culture, which is the biggest problem.
And if you can't be clear about what the culture is, then you end up resenting people, co-founders. There are so many situations where you sort of peel the onion and you realize why something's not working out is because you're deeply dissatisfied with someone's attention to detail, or the way we document things, or it's like we're not consistent with our sprints or something like that, right? And maybe that's important to you. And to the other person, they're looking for flexibility, they're looking for nimbleness, they're looking for a way that fits with what they learned in their previous company, right? And maybe that's not wrong. It's just like different, right? Yeah. So someone's got to say, we're optimizing for a certain way of working. We're going to have a culture that is about daily communication. It's going to be about us spending a lot of time together as a team, or it's going to be about remote. It's going to be about prioritizing the good of our customer, or maybe it's something else, right? Like our communities, whatever it is. Like those set of values, when those are at odds, is where people don't get along, things break.
No, I mean, something that I also recommend to companies I'm working with is that culture has to be an alignment exercise from top to bottom. What I mean by that is you need to start with, what is your company trying to do? What is your value proposition to the market? Are you the lowest cost provider? Are you the best quality provider? Are you someone are you starting a new market that doesn't exist today? The reason that's important from my end is because you need a support system in the culture and organization that enables you to execute on that promise. If you're saying you're the lowest cost provider to your customer, you need to build a company culture that operates with that mindset day in and day out. You can't be a company that decides that I'm going to take a 2-hour flight and go business class, right? It means by default, you're expecting we're going to go economy class to that flight, because if we don't do that, we cannot meet the promise of the organization. So for me, I like to link it in that way as well, because if your culture does not mirror how you come out to the customer in your value proposition, then over time, especially as you grow, you're going to veer off of that promise. And this is where a lot of companies start failing. And you've seen this more than I have, I'm sure, is that companies sometimes they hit that growth trajectory. They start that hockey stick growth, all of a sudden to plateau, then nosedive into the ground. And a lot of times of course, there's a product issue. Sometimes there's a financial runway issue, but also the people issues also play a big part.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Where you are living inconsistent with values, or where leadership is operating in a way that is completely separate and inconsistent with where the rest of the company is expected to be. Well, I mean, it sounds kind of obvious that it happens every day. Then, yes, what do you get? You get people being annoyed and frustrated, and then eventually dysfunction sets in.
No, yeah, I love it. So Vijay, this has been an amazing conversation. And I know we could go on for hours here, but for the sake of everyone's time, what is the best way for our listeners to reach out to you, get in touch with you, and learn more about, your startup system or your executive coaching? How do you recommend folks?
Sure. 3 ways. 1, my website, mystartupsystem.com. 2, my startup system on Substack. And then 3rd is the funding framework, available where good books are sold online.
No, definitely. And to the listeners out there, everything Vijay mentioned, it links below in the description. So click on there, you'll head right into the sources he was mentioning. And I highly recommend you reach out, right? There's a lot to learn. And, Vijay's been, you've been around so many startups. And hopefully this conversation is very valuable. It was even valuable to me as someone who's been working with a lot of startups. Amazing conversation. And Vijay, thank you very much for your time. And again, pleasure as always in having you.
Thank you. It was really fun. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.